I'm Catherine Carr, your host, and this is Relatively, the podcast about potentially the longest relationships of your life. Welcome back. We have online over 60 episodes of the podcast Relatively with guests like the Van Tullikens, Jess Phillips MP, Benjamin Zephaniah, Gok Wan, and many, many more. So do go to the back catalogue after you've listened or watched this. The series is being relaunched. That's the news with the Hearer Network, the UK's first female-focused video podcast network. And over the next 4 episodes in this mini-series about siblings, we're going to be exploring some of the topics which have come up again and again and again. My guest today is author, presenter, poet and speaker. Salma El-Wardany's work revolves around the experiences of feminism, gender and womanhood. She's a former BBC London breakfast show host and has also presented programmes on Radio 5 Live, BBC Radio 4 and the BBC World Service. She has as well written an acclaimed novel called These Impossible Things, which is being adapted for Channel 4, and is a judge on the Women's Prize for Fiction 2026.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
My name is Salma El-Wardany and this is Relatively. Before you wonder what has happened to Catherine Carr, fear not, she is alive and well. In fact, she is sitting right next to me. But today we've decided to turn the tables and take Catherine out of the driver's seat and put her into the guest slot so she can answer all of the questions for a change, especially questions about her new book. Catherine, welcome to your own podcast.
Thank you. This feels odd, but good.
It feels very bizarre. But you have a brand new book that is out in the world. So I feel like now is the time to talk about all things to do with the book. And you can't really interview yourself.
No, that would be one thing that I can't do.
It would be bizarre and weird. And so you very kindly asked me to come here and do it instead. And I'm so excited to get into it. And of course, we've got Relatively the podcast. And now you have this book, Who's the Favourite? The loving, messy realities of sibling relationships, because you have been obsessed with sibling relationships for some time now. So let's start at the very beginning. Why was it important to write the book and put it in this format?
I think it was important to write the book because I learned so much. I started the podcast back in 2020, sort of during the pandemic, really, when I saw people around me starting to Zoom their grown-up siblings and reach out to people they'd grown up with, feeling frightened and feeling like they needed their pack. And it was from that moment on that I started researching and learning and realising what sibling relationships mean. It's like a filter went over my eyes and I started looking at my friends, my husband, my children certainly, but also every book, film, TV show, play. Suddenly I looked at the sibling dynamics in them and I thought, oh my goodness. So once I'd done all of that research, I really needed to write it down.
And indeed you have. Before we get into the book, which is all about siblings, let's determine your makeup in the sibling hierarchy. Where do you sit in the line of succession?
So I'm the middle of 3 girls, which sometimes people then go, oh, yes. It's sort of a different setup maybe to some families in that I'm close in age to my older sister Bex. About 22 months separates us. And then there's a whopping 6 years between me and CJ, the baby. And what makes it more unusual, when my parents divorced, we were living in the Netherlands. I was 11 and my mum moved out and she took CJ, the baby, with her. So we had one parent each and separated sisters. And then me and my older sister and my dad moved back to the UK. So it kind of became this slightly nature-nurture experiment. And it meant that as an adult, I've never taken them for granted. I think you can grow up with your siblings and sort of feel like they're part of the furniture. They'll always be there. I never assumed that.
How much of trying to figure out your own sibling dynamic has inspired the book?
I'm not sure it's so much about figuring out the sibling dynamic as much as realising this kind of bittersweet gift that separation gave us. Because I see around me now, I'm 48, a lot of middle-aged people coming back together with their siblings to deal with ageing parents and things like that. Kind of something that happens to a lot of us in midlife. And those people who haven't had to or haven't needed to work to build close relationships with their siblings before that point can really struggle. I don't think we will struggle because we had to work to build those relationships.
Right.
So it not only sort of predisposed me to think more about sibling relationships and be more aware, but it has given this kind of, lovely gift really to all 3 of us. The book is called Who's the Favourite? It's a great question to ask people.
Who is the favourite?
I couldn't possibly answer that question.
Surely if you won't answer the question, it means it's you. It must be you.
Maybe. I did say to somebody the other day that a good friend of mine said she'd convened this family meeting with her grown-up siblings and said, this meeting is to confess that I feel a bit guilty that I am the favourite. All the other siblings said, oh God, I thought I was the
Which is well done to the parents for making them all believe that they're each the favourite. It means they were, I suppose, all very well nurtured and loved. Or the parents are master manipulators, actually.
Favouritism isn't often intentional. It's kind of an accident of all of those ingredients that can lead a child to feel like that or lead the other siblings to think they're the favourite. So it's really three-dimensional.
So, Catherine, you're being tight-lipped about being the favourite or not, allegedly. Why did you decide to write the book then as the middle child?
I have said that I started the podcast and wrote the book to finally get some attention as the middle child, but it is a bit of a power move to have the person with the pen writing the story and writing the anecdotes down. I do take great pains in the book to say this is just my version of events.
So let's talk about for a moment how you broke down the book, because siblings is such a huge topic and it kind of can be quite overwhelming when you start. And you've broken it down into these different chapters dealing with bereavement and friendship and estrangement. And you start with birth order.
Well, I think starting with birth order made obvious sense. When you talk about siblings, they ask who's the oldest, they ask who's the middle, they make a joke about that, they find out who the spoilt baby is, they make a joke about that, and then often they just stop. So I started there because it's familiar. And I think with a lot of siblings, that familiar question does unlock something about their dynamic. And strangely on the podcast, a lot of people used birth order as a way to explain their relationships. Oh, she would say that. She's such a bossy older sister. So they're making birth order personal. But I wanted to sort of start there and then say, okay, but what else? So I talk about roles and labels you might have in the family, like you might be really good at entertaining younger relatives or terrible at housework or good at sharing or sporty. And you might be a girl, you might be a boy. So all of a sudden these layers of roles and labels add up to your identity in the family system. So I wanted to find out, well, when do you become friends? If you do, what happens? What spark makes you stop thinking, I would literally rather be on the backseat of the car with anyone else except them, to then sometimes being like, this is my ride or die.
Yes, I remember you wrote about someone that you had interviewed and their sister was always just this annoying baby sister until they were all out with friends and he saw her just dancing and entertaining people on the dance floor, and he realised and then saw her through everyone else's eyes as this remarkably vivacious, wonderful woman who was bringing a lot of joy to everyone.
Yeah, that's Dan Snow, the historian. And his bullying, he said I was quite a bully to her and it's like the biggest regret of my life. And you're right, in that moment he saw Becca and was like, oh, he saw her how all his other sixth form male mates saw her as really cool and beautiful and great at dancing and really good company. And he thought, I've been such an idiot. But that's really common.
Right.
And you're away from your parents who've often, not because they're being mean or it's intentional, they've often created a dynamic which you sort of slot into. They might give you some of those labels. Oh, Salma, you're so tidy. You're so much tidier than your brother or something. So then you start thinking that's who you are.
Yeah.
When you leave home, you can be like, I permission to be messy.
Yeah, and you talk about that in the book actually, and it's interesting because it feels like you can only really reassert your relationships with your siblings in a genuine manner once you are out of that family dynamic and you don't have your parents watching you or putting their own pressures, not maliciously, but just because the family life is hard, on top of you, and actually you suddenly get to see your siblings as real humans as opposed to the one mum's always shouting at or the one that's always getting into trouble.
Yeah, totally. And I think Purna Bell and Priya Joy, two sisters who spent some time apart, one lived in India for a little while and the other one stayed in Kent. And they tell the story in the podcast of the moment where they got an Air India flight back to India together. They were of legal drinking age and all of a sudden they were literally separate from anybody in a plane in the sky with a drinks trolley. And that was it. Exactly. Outside of those parental influences, their relationship flourished.
Yeah, and I know Puna and her sister have such a gorgeous relationship, and she always talks about it actually, and the closeness that they have. It always feels very beautiful from the outside.
Yeah.
Like they are genuine mates.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, it's not a book which is sort of saccharine, and it doesn't sort of put pressure. I don't want it to put pressure on people that you must be friends.
Yeah.
because I think if we talk and think more about sibling relationships and have better language to do it, which I hope the book gives us, then we can start to talk and think more about sibling relationships which are trickier or sadder or more challenging or sometimes just too hurtful to continue with. I don't think that the language of being, oh, he was like a brother to me, or she's as close as a sister, is always helpful. I think it puts some pressure on people, which is actually quite hard.
I want to talk about language, actually, because I find this bit fascinating. Because I know you talk about in the book as well that we don't really have the language to talk about siblings in the way that we have the language to talk about romantic relationships, or we're very adept perhaps at talking about mother-daughter, father-daughter, father-son dynamics. Why do you think we don't have the language to talk about sibling relationships? And when did it first hit you that we didn't have adequate tools to discuss this?
Sibling relationships have been described to me as the missing piece of the puzzle of psychoanalysis.
Wow.
And therapists that I spoke to said it's so frustrating. They're trained in all these vertical relationships, mother-child maybe, or horizontal ones which are romantic. But they're not even trained in sibling therapy. And yet they get quite a lot of siblings, particularly at that time I described, when they have to care for their parents, deal with inheritance, all the flashpoints, coming into their therapy rooms and saying, I need to talk about this, because they're really foundational.
In the book, you speak about the order of siblings, the middle child, the bossy elder, the spoilt baby. Is there ever times in which the birth order is usurped? Have you come across it in which the baby is responsible and stoic and the eldest is just fly away and carefree? Does it ever change?
I think it can. I think it's really environment dependent. I like to think of babies being born in a river. Each child's plopped into the river in a certain sort of body of water, and that changes by the time the next one arrives. So I think it depends on what sort of position your family was in, how much money there was, where you lived, what the stress was like. All these sorts of surrounding factors can influence how the child develops, as well as their sibling relationships. So it might just be that the family needed the baby to be more responsible by the time they arrived because things had all gone wrong.
Right.
My argument is really that, and I'll give you an example, my little sister helped me out a few weeks ago by booking an Airbnb for me to go and do some quiet work. And she said on text, I've booked for it, I've paid for it, just go. I don't mind sometimes being the oldest. But actually stepping down and away from that position of being her big sister was kind of weird. So I think...
Was it freeing?
Yeah, really freeing. Really freeing.
The weight of everything that you're supposed to be, I suppose.
Yeah.
I find that really, really fascinating, actually. And your analogy of family being a river and it moving and changing, when I read that in the book, it was perhaps the first time family dynamics made more sense to me. I found it such a helpful analogy. And I remember growing up and asking my mum, who is a staunch feminist and raised us as a staunch feminist, and I have a brother, so there's boy-girl dynamic. And it was always kind of, I raise you the same because equal and et cetera, et cetera. But there were times when things were different. And I remember stomping my foot quite angrily and saying to my mum, but why is he allowed to do this? Or why is it treated differently? Or whatever the question might have been at the time. And I remember my mum saying once, it's different. It just is different, which I felt absolutely flew in the face of everything she'd ever taught me about gender and us being treated the same. And it really infuriated me. And when I read your analogy about the river, I went, oh, well, yeah, that does make sense, actually, because everything changes year on year and nothing ever stays the same. So I can't ever possibly be born into the same environment that my brother was born into because it's just so profoundly different. And it gave me a lot of empathy, actually, for my parents.
Yeah.
And I found it really useful to look at it like that. Well, why hasn't anyone just described it like that previously? Because that makes more sense. And I think you can only really have appreciation for that as an adult when you realise how mundane and terrible adulthood is and all the terrible decisions.
And how you're winging it as a grown-up. Your children look to you to have these big answers and to be even-handed and equitable all the time, but your job is stressful and you're tired and your mother is ill and you've had a bad haircut and the dog has got to go to the vets or whatever. You realise as an adult your parents were simply people. Every single expert, academic, researcher, writer that I spoke to for the book would say, well, Catherine, it's really frustrating. You know, the trouble is we just don't know enough. And Claire Hughes from the Centre for Family Research at the University of Cambridge said, what's really irritating is when you speak to normal people like you and me, they instantly and instinctively get how important siblings are.
Yeah, and I never thought about it till I read your book. I had never consciously considered that 80% of people have a sibling.
Yeah.
But actually, I thought, God, that's really profound. There's so many of us dealing with the same thing, but not really having the ability to talk about it. Catherine, you have been podcasting, writing, thinking about siblings for over 5 years now. And of course, all the work that you've done in bringing this book together. What is the most surprising thing that you've learnt?
I think it's that people don't appreciate that these siblings, brothers and sisters, could be in their lives for nearly 100 years, and that they are unique relationships that go from hierarchical, bigger, middle, smaller, to horizontal, and they evolve so much. You make each other different things all the time, brothers and sisters-in-law, aunties and uncles. Yeah. And then you become children back together again who might grieve for your parents together. And then you might become old ladies and old men together. Yeah. And there's research that shows an increase in people's well-being if you have a good relationship with your sibling and you get to hang out with them when you're like 80, 90.
Oh, really?
I had not thought about the longevity of this relationship until someone pointed it out to me. And it still kind of shocks people when I then tell them. Once you've grasped that, I think the rest of it kind of slots into place.
Yeah, because, and you say this a lot in your book, they are potentially the oldest relationships of your life with your siblings. I imagine in your 80s, it would be quite comforting to have someone, and they could be the only person next to you who has that wealth and depth of shared history. And I know you talk about memory a lot in the book, don't you? The memory bank that I suppose exists between siblings.
It is. I think shared history and someone as being a keeper of your shared history, even if it's imperfect because you remember things differently, your siblings are your best hope for going back there.
How often do you find siblings opt out of the sibling dynamic? I
think estrangement, when people not give up, but they let go of a sibling bond a little bit, it affects more people than we might think. I think it's 28% of siblings have experienced it. And it's only in the last few years that the word has even been recognised. I think the royal family, for example, the sad stories of the Beckons and the Murdochs and others have really shone a light on estrangement, but then by default, siblings. And people have started to talk more about why these relationships might break down. It might be politics. It might be ideas about who people are free to marry, or religion, or culture, or how they're raising their children, or a whole host of things. And it might be because one of the siblings isn't very nice to the other. You know, I think sometimes because we assume there's this special sauce about sibling relationships, which there can be, that you must forgive everything of your sibling. And you don't have to. You don't have to forgive your sibling if they are hurtful, really, really hurtful to you. You don't have to. And so I think we should be more honest about the challenges of that very long relationship and support people if you do manage to achieve estrangement. It's not one and done. You don't get to forget and not see that person. You're still on a distant branch of the family tree. And when they make a move, you're going to feel it. Yeah. You're always connected, and that is really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. We could talk for hours on that alone. I wanted to ask you, what do your sisters think of the book?
I mean, they're very proud of me, sweetly, and they came to the launch and took the badges. And then I think when I said, you know, these are the people that you've known since blah, 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 a lot of people in the launch, in the party, reported my two sisters kind of, that's us.
Very smug.
Yes,
hello.
That's us. I think all relationships, and certainly sibling relationships, are processes. And I don't ever think you get to the point where you're with anybody where you think, yep, that's it. And I end the book saying, oh my gosh, you know, I need to keep working at loving them more. Yeah. So we can be those happy old ladies together.
Yes, we can be the golden girls
We can
together.
be the golden girls.
Yes, and it's a beautiful way to end it. Catherine, you have dedicated the book to Squidget and Bad Harry, which I assumed immediately were your sisters. But can you explain why they're called Squidget and Bad Harry?
So, yes, Squidget is my little sister. Not so small now. This is the three of us, actually.
Them.
Yes. So this is Squidget. This is my sister's 50th. This is Squidget. This is Bad Harry. And this is me.
And just for people who are listening, this is a black and white picture. You're all wearing sunglasses and floral floaty dresses. It's giving very 1960s superstar chic.
And you know, what's interesting, because we didn't grow up all the time and together, that when we are together, there's a sort of glittery feeling that we get, I think. And looking ahead, 50 now, 40-something, me 40-something, I sort of feel like I really hope that we're feeling like we look here, which was really happy for a lot of years.
You're all smiling and laughing and being very candid. Let's not look at the camera, but let's laugh heartily. It's a gorgeous picture.
Thank you, I love it.
And I like that they now have pride of place in the studio.
Quite right.
As they should. You're going to read a little bit from the book, I believe.
I will do. The whole book is an invitation to talk more.
Yes.
And this is how the introduction ends. My hope is that this book will nudge siblings to think and talk more about what they shared and still share, because who we grow up with is profoundly important and can tell us so much about ourselves in the present. To get to the truth about who we are, we usually have to start from the beginning, when roles were assigned by birth order and parental whim, and then figure out if these still hold true. Because chances are we are not exactly who our parents assumed.
Very good. It is fascinating and beautiful and wonderful. And it really made me think about my own sibling relationship. Admittedly, in ways I didn't want to. It really just reading the book just opens up a lot. And then you start going back and questioning things from your child and going, oh, actually, that's a good point. Yeah, we do look at things differently, or we hold memories differently, or we're born into different families. But it is entirely fascinating. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Salma.
A wonderful book.
Okay, Salma, if we could play the game again and swap places again,
Yes,
I would
ma'am.
like to ask you some questions about you and your sibling.
Great, I'm off duty now, so
You can relax.
Go ahead.
I'm in charge. So as the book does, I want to start with birth order, and then I'm going to work out who I think you are. Where do you sit in your family?
So there's me and my brother Hassan, and yeah, technically I'm the baby.
So you don't think there's anything about your role in the family which is stereotypically baby-ish?
I think there's a lot about my role in the family that's stereotypically babyish, actually.
One of the big things about siblings is when the next one arrives, the one who was there before feels a little bit put out and pushed out in their mother's affection. That doesn't happen with the last child, regardless of how many there are. I think some of the stereotypical traits of a baby is that they're quite good at performing for attention. Is that true?
What are you saying, Catherine? I don't know. What could you possibly be saying about me? I'm very good at performing. I'm going to be very honest. Yeah, I suppose I am very good at performing. And I'm sure the psychological answer to that would be maybe I wanted my parents' attention. I have no memory of yearning for my parents' attention.
Okay. And maybe because there was one girl and one boy, it always felt like there was quite a differentiation between you anyway.
And we grew up quite unconventionally, I think, in that we were from about my age, about 5, so my brother would have been about 7. We were home educated. And so it was just me and my brother at home being home educated by my mum. What I will say is I begged my parents for a little sister. I yearned. Every single wish I could possibly ever make was to have a baby sister. And I said to my mum repeatedly, can I please have a baby sister? And she would always say something annoying to me like, it's up to God. And I would think, well, no, it isn't, actually. You and my dad have to do something to make it happen first. And then you can leave it up to whoever you want. But I really yearned for a baby sister.
Do you still wish you had a sister?
That's a really good question. I haven't thought about that. I sometimes think enough family members. I've got enough. And I don't just mean that in my immediate family, but I am half Egyptian, half Irish. And then my stepdad's Pakistani and he's my dad, and it's just a lot of family to keep track of. Like, there's a lot of people in all of those different families. So I think the idea now of having even more is quite overwhelming, actually. I haven't yearned for it for a long time.
Yeah, and as you say, you've been really intentional in looking for close female friendships with your old friends. And
maybe, and I'm very, very obsessed with female friendships. And I think it's kind of one of the most glorious relationships. And you're obsessed with siblings, and you've written this whole book, and my novel These Impossible Things is very much a love letter to female friendships because I'm obsessed with female friendships. So maybe I'm looking for sisters in a way.
Yeah, or sisterhood.
or sisterhood. Yeah, I think there's a level to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how do you think your older brother would describe you? You said you're good at performing, no shade, you're excellent at performing, how do you think if he was sitting in that chair, would say that you are?
Do you know what, actually? So not last night, but the night before, my brother sent me a message on Instagram. And I think this is going to answer your question, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Pull it up. So he sent me a video on Instagram. The video was of a goat. Okay.
It's not promising.
It was of a kid goat. It's just a goat jumping around. So he sent me this video with the following message. I really think you would suit having a small goat as a pet. Forget your dog. A goat suits you better. And then I replied saying, what is it about this goat jumping about like an idiot that you think suits me better exactly? And he replied, this is verbatim from this message that I have here. The absolute chaos, sense of self-importance and clumsiness fits your vibe very well. So that's what my brother thinks about me, that I am chaotic and clumsy and self-important. And then I replied, actually, which is going to
that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, my exact reply, again, verbatim. There's going to come a time when you will have to go through my PA to reach me. And honestly, I'm really looking forward to that. And then I said, but also, yes, this is me.
That's really good. So then, okay. So then how...
That answers your question.
That answers my questions brilliantly. But how would you then describe him? He's your older brother and he's, judge and juried you there.
He has indeed. I would say my older brother is very stoic, salient. We are chalk and cheese. Everyone says that about us. I am outgoing and vivacious and loud and clumsy and chaotic. And he will sit quietly and not say anything. But he is, I think you would look at him and go, oh, he's shy. I think that was always the word that was used for him when we were growing up. But he's not shy in the way that's not, that's uncertain. He's very quietly confident. You couldn't budge him. You couldn't get him to do something you didn't want him to do. He doesn't feel the need to talk a lot. He doesn't talk about his feelings. I went through a stage where I would always be like, but how are you feeling? And he was like, why do you keep asking me that? I'm fine. I have a need to explore all of my feelings and every little crumb of it, and I will take it and pick it up and look at it from all the angles. My brother doesn't do that. He just quietly, confidently goes about life. He's very solid. If I could not talk to my brother for 3 months, and then I could pick up the phone and say, this just happened to me, I need you here right now. And he'd be like, okay.
So you have these two really distinct roles. He's more like a rock, I would say, it sounds like.
Sturdy.
And you could depend on him to be constant.
Yeah.
But does your kind of love of examining feelings and taking care of your own extend to the fact that maybe your role in the family is the emotional caretaker?
Probably, yeah. No, definitely. There's no probably about it. I have the ability to talk to everyone in my family, and I am the one that can bring the family together. I play that role a lot in terms of managing everyone's ability to have relationships with one another.
That's quite a lot, like an emotional superconductor.
Like an emotional support dog is what I am.
Or goat, if you like.
Or goat, yes, as it is. Yeah, it is a lot, actually. And in the pandemic, my parents got divorced. So my mum and my stepdad got divorced. And I played that role extensively, and it was terrible.
Yeah.
That's why I don't want any more family members, Catherine.
I see.
We didn't want to put more in the mix. Then I have to look after them as well. We don't want that.
I just think it's so interesting with your brother because the freedom to be one way that he allows himself sometimes doesn't allow the freedom for the other person because someone sometimes has to pick up the slack. He might have to pick up the slack in some areas, but it sounds like
he doesn't.
In the emotional arena, that's yours that's your responsibility.
Yes, and by the way, sometimes I think it's self-inflicted.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's entirely my fault because my brother because he's just quietly confident and you can't budge him and he doesn't care. So he would kind of be like, well, if my mum or my dad is annoyed about something or is bothered about something that's happening, I don't care. Well, it's not my problem. Whereas I will be like, well, we have to sort it out and kind of make everything better. Whereas there are many a time where I shouldn't do that and I should just go, well, I can't fix everyone's relationships. And I have got to that stage post-divorce, but it's taken me many, many years to get to that stage where it's like I can't make my my brother and my mum have a better relationship, or my brother and my dad, or my mum and my dad. I cannot make those relationships better. And I have had to learn to take my fingers off of it.
Yeah.
I did do it, but to my detriment. And there are times maybe when it was asked of me, and there were times when it wasn't.
I don't think you're alone, though. A lot of daughters feel that that's their job, I
Yeah.
think, to be hypervigilant and to grease the wheels of it all.
Well, yeah, and I think as women, we're kind of bred and raised to make everything comfortable for everyone. And because you're either more emotionally intelligent, or perhaps you're more advanced or more mature, or you can handle it, or you're better at it, then we have to then support everyone else. And so it is a role that is societally just expected, and you play it. And so I think then when there is the opportunity in a family setting, you then just fall into it because you've kind of been trained as a muscle memory. It just happens, which is kind of rubbish, actually.
I think we've actually got a clip of you talking about exactly this, the way that women, or girls maybe more, are conditioned to doing this sort of emotional labour in families.
So, for example, if you are a woman, then you are disproportionately managing emotional labour. You are disproportionately making sure that the vibe is okay and that everyone's emotions are all right, because that's what we've been trained to do since birth. And it is a natural training of the patriarchy. So we just go ahead and manage the vibe. So you are always trying to keep the peace. I know that I was constantly trying to keep the peace between my parents growing up, and it was something that I automatically did, and I think to an extent was expected to do. And my brother never took on that role, and I don't think he ever felt any pressure to keep the peace between my parents. It did not occur to him. And yet here I was being the United Nations between my parents.
United Nations, that's such a good...
I am.
I have described myself as Kofi Annan. It's an old reference, but...
I love that you took Kofi Annan and you were like, that, I'll go for the top dog.
Just reach for the pinnacle there. And that clip is taken from your new podcast, your new show, which is called what and coming soon?
It is coming soon, and it's called Sunday Cervix. And it is a podcast all about women and womanhood, from the big, huge political conversations of our times to the tiny things that we also talk about, the tiny trivial things. If we're talking about women, we're talking about the roles that they play and how that manifests, especially in families.
Brilliant. I can't wait for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so where else, until Sunday Cervix comes out, can people find you on the internet? Where can they see and hear you?
Well, like all good millennials, everywhere is the answer. Sunday Cervix is a newsletter on Substack, and that is the podcast will be the next iteration, extension of it. But for now, you can find it with the back catalogue of all the articles over on Substack, or you can find me most commonly on Instagram. It's just my name, Salma El-Wardany.
Thank you so much. And before you go, we have badges, we have merch.
This is the only reason I've come here today, Catherine, to be honest. I've seen the badges on social media and I want one, maybe more.
So we have, you can say yes or no to each one.
Okay.
The bossy one, yes or no. There we are, straight on.
That's very me.
The troublemaker, yes or no.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's going straight on. Firstborn energy, nope. It belongs to another. And are you deserving of this one, Salma, the favourite?
Big question. If you were to ask who the favourite was in my family, and I think my brother would agree with this, by the way.
Okay.
I just want to caveat that. I am my dad's favourite and he is my mum's favourite.
Oh, very, very good.
I'm not being diplomatic. Obviously, as a weird overachieving child, I feel like I have to win everything. I'm deeply competitive as well. And I used to say to my mum, who's your favourite? Who's your favourite? And she would say, you're my favourite daughter, which infuriated me. And I would say, but I'm your only daughter, in a very childish way, because I was but a child. And she would say, yes. And I thought, that's a cop-out, Ma. But I think my brother was, but I'm definitely my dad's favourite. And my brother would agree with that as well.
So we'll get another badge when we finish with this, and then you can take it to him. Have a ceremony.
Yeah, I think so. I think we could. I will, because I've already got 2 badges on here. I feel like maybe I should earn this a bit more. Do you think I should earn this?
I think you should be a very good goat and earn that.
Yes, I think be a good goat. And then I should probably have a baby as well. Do I count as the baby of the family? I feel like I'd like to be the baby of the family as well.
Beg your pardon?
Is there a baby badge?
There is, of course, a baby badge. It fell on the floor.
Typically, of course, you only give your guests 1 badge. And what does this say about me? That
Except the competitive overachieving ones, we give them as many badges as they demand.
I have 4 badges and I've pinned 3 on me.
You're like a pearly queen. Go on your way.
Pearly sibling.
Yeah, you're a pearly
yes,
sibling.
great. So now I have all the badges, which
You're the winner. Well done.
ultimately I feel really pleased about, Catherine. You can make as many digs as you like about me being an overachiever, but I'm the one that's winning. So what do you want from me?
Thank you so much. What a pleasure.
Thank you, and thank you for all my badges.
I talked to therapist Lisa Bruton all about birth order, about the siblings that she sees in her therapy room, and how our place in the family sometimes pops out in the big wide world.
If our sibling loves us, we take on at some level that we are lovable. If they reject us for some reason, it can also touch on something quite core in us.
Relatively was created and presented by me, Catherine Carr. The executive producer is Kirsty Hunter, and the head of production is Sandra Ferrari. This is a Hero production recorded at Spotify Studios. Until next time, bye-bye.